You're about to discover the 10 texting secrets that will completely change how women respond to you. I guarantee that by the time you finish this series, you'll understand exactly how to craft messages that make her excited to hear from you, eager to respond immediately, and thinking about you long after she puts her phone down. This is you staring at your phone, trying to figure out what to text her. You've typed and deleted the same message 5 times. Your palms are sweating. You're overthinking every single word. Sound familiar? What should you say? How do you keep the conversation flowing? And most importantly, how do you make her actually want to text you back? Here's the first mistake that kills your chances before you even hit send. When you're texting a woman, don't try to be perfect or overly polite. Before we dive into the specific techniques, I need you to completely shift your mindset about texting. You need to understand that she's just another person with a phone. Nothing more. Don't treat her messages like they're made of gold just because she's attractive. I know this might sound obvious, but it's absolutely critical that you internalize this concept. From now on, every time you're about to send a text to a woman, I want you to remember that she receives dozens of boring, predictable messages every single day from guys who are trying way too hard. The second thing you must understand is that you need to position yourself as someone who has options, while she needs to earn your attention. Don't worry, I'll show you exactly how to do this as we go through each technique. When you text a woman, her subconscious mind is constantly evaluating whether you're different from all the other guys messaging her. If you've been paying attention to psychology and human behavior, you'll know that women make decisions based on emotions first, then justify them with logic later. This means your texts need to trigger the right emotional responses. Let me explain what attraction looks like through text messages. The most important concept you need to grasp is that attraction through texting works differently than face-to-face interaction. Without understanding how digital attraction operates, you'll keep getting ignored or receiving those dreaded one-word responses. There are no exceptions to this rule. Unlike men, women often respond to texts based on how those messages make them feel rather than the actual information being conveyed. They see a message, feel something, and respond to that emotion. Because their responses are emotion-driven, they can't consciously control whether they find your text interesting or boring. Attraction through texting is a subconscious response that women have towards certain messaging patterns and techniques. But before we explore the specific tricks, let me clarify a few essential facts. First, women cannot control whether they find your text engaging or dull. Second, women cannot control whether they feel compelled to respond immediately or ignore you completely. This means that text-based attraction happens below the level of conscious awareness. Now imagine her phone lighting up with your message. There's a part of her mind that immediately starts analyzing your text to determine if you're worth her time and attention. This mental process is separate from her logical thinking. If this emotional radar finds your message compelling, her logical mind won't be able to resist responding, even if she's busy or trying to play hard to get. That's why some women end up constantly texting guys who seem completely wrong for them on paper. Her rational brain keeps telling her she should focus on more suitable options, but because she's emotionally engaged by certain texting patterns, logic takes a back seat to feeling. Before we continue, remember this crucial point. Every woman, regardless of her age or background, is subconsciously looking for a man who stands out from the crowd through his communication. This isn't about what society tells us about relationships, but about the psychological reality of how her mind processes your messages. So from this moment forward, whenever you send a text, understand that her subconscious is scanning your words to determine if you're genuinely interesting or just another generic guy. This mental radar looks for several key indicators. The most important is whether you seem like someone who has better things to do than chase her through endless text conversations. If your messages demonstrate that you're living an interesting life while she's just one small part of it, her radar will recognize you as high value. And that's when she becomes truly interested in continuing the conversation. I know this might sound counterintuitive, but trust me, by the end of this series, you'll understand exactly how to make any woman prioritize responding to your texts over everyone else's. So what should you actually text? And how should you structure your messages to trigger this positive response? Let's start with something most guys completely overlook: timing and message structure. If you've ever researched texting advice before, you will find some people saying you should always respond immediately, others claiming you should wait hours before replying, and still others suggesting you mirror her response time. The first thing I want you to do is forget all of that. It's all surface level advice that misses the real point. There are 3 core principles I want you to focus on when it comes to the timing and structure of your texts. The biggest mistake most men make is sending long, detailed messages that look like essays. This immediately signals that you have too much time on your hands and that talking to her is the highlight of your day. Instead, make it a habit to keep your messages concise and intriguing. This is the first principle. Your text should leave her wanting to know more, not feeling like she's reading a novel. The second principle is to sometimes leave conversations unfinished when they're going well. For example, if you're having a great text exchange and she says something funny, you could respond with something like, "Your trouble. I've got to run, but we'll continue this later," and then actually stop texting for a while. You'll likely notice that she starts initiating the next conversation or tries to keep the current one going. Attractive women aren't used to guys ending conversations first, especially good ones. They're usually the ones who decide when the interaction is over. Therefore, occasionally cutting things short demonstrates that you have a life outside of your phone, which automatically makes you more intriguing. The third and most crucial principle about message structure is this. Imagine you're texting with someone whose time is extremely valuable. How would your messages look? You probably wouldn't send paragraph after paragraph. You'd be direct, engaging, and respectful of their schedule. Now imagine texting someone who has nothing better to do than chat with you all day. Your messages would probably be longer, more frequent, and less thoughtful. When you text a woman, which category do you want to fall into? The person whose time seems valuable is automatically perceived as more interesting. This is the mindset I want you to adopt when crafting your messages. The first thing you should focus on is making your texts feel effortless rather than calculated. If you want to seem like someone with options, your messages shouldn't look like you spent 20 minutes crafting each one. If she asks you a question, Don't rush to provide a detailed answer immediately. Sometimes, a simple response that shows you read her message but aren't dropping everything to engage in a long conversation works better. The woman won't necessarily notice the specific techniques you're using, but she will notice whether your texting style makes her feel like she's talking to someone interesting or someone desperate for her attention. Now, we've covered the foundation of attractive texting. Let's move on to the actual content of your messages and how to structure conversations that keep her engaged. I'm going to give you a framework that you should remember for every text conversation you have with a woman. 60% of your messages should be about creating intrigue and mystery. 30% should be about building emotional connection. And only 10% should be about logistics like making plans or asking direct questions. Don't worry, I'll break down each category in detail. But first, let me explain why this ratio is so effective. Why focus so heavily on intrigue and mystery rather than trying to impress her with your accomplishments? Because in any text conversation, the person who reveals everything about themselves first is the one who needs the other person's validation. Think about it like a job interview conducted through text. The conversation focuses on the applicant's background, qualifications, and personality because they're the ones seeking approval. The same dynamic applies to your conversations with women. The person who shares too much personal information too quickly is positioning themselves as the one seeking approval. That's why you should focus on creating curiosity about yourself rather than laying all your cards on the table. Let's start with the first category, creating intrigue and mystery through your texts. How do you do this without seeming fake or manipulative? I've already explained this concept in previous content, but let me give you a texting-specific approach. The key is to share just enough information to spark her curiosity, while leaving plenty of gaps she'll want to fill in. When she asks about your day, don't give her a complete rundown of everything you did. Instead, mention something interesting but incomplete. For example, if she texts, "How was your day?" Most guys respond with something like, "Pretty good. Went to work, grabbed lunch with a coworker, hit the gym, and now I'm just relaxing at home watching Netflix." This tells her everything and leaves nothing to wonder about. Instead, you could respond with something like, "Interesting day. Had to deal with some unexpected drama, but it worked out better than I thought it would." Now she's curious about what the drama was, how you handled it, and why it worked out well. You've created multiple conversation threads she can pursue. The second technique for building intrigue is what I call the callback method. Reference something from a previous conversation without fully explaining it. If you mentioned going somewhere interesting last week, you might text, "Ended up back at that place we talked about. You were right about what you said." Even if she doesn't immediately remember the exact conversation, she'll be intrigued enough to ask for clarification. Another powerful approach is the partial story technique. Start telling her about something that happened to you, but don't finish the story in one message. "You won't believe what happened to me today. This woman at the coffee shop did something that completely caught me off guard." Then wait for her to ask what happened before continuing. This creates natural engagement because humans hate unfinished stories. The key with all these mystery-building techniques is that they should feel natural. not forced. You're not trying to be deliberately cryptic or confusing. You're simply sharing your life in a way that makes her want to know more. Moving on to the 30% that should focus on emotional connection. This doesn't mean getting deep and personal immediately. Emotional connection through text happens when you make her feel something. Whether that's laughter, curiosity, slight frustration, or excitement, one of the most effective ways to create emotional connection is through playful teasing. But there's a right way and a wrong way to do this. The wrong way is to tease her about things she's insecure about or to be mean-spirited. The right way is to tease her about things she's proud of or confident about. If she mentions she's a good cook, you might respond with, "Sure you are. I bet you consider making toast a culinary masterpiece." This kind of playful challenge creates a fun dynamic where she wants to prove you wrong. She might send you pictures of her cooking or invite you over to try her food. Another emotional connection technique is the assumption method. Instead of asking her questions, make playful assumptions about her. Rather than texting, "What kind of music do you like?" you could say, "You seem like someone who secretly listens to embarrassing pop music when no one's around." This is more engaging because she either has to correct your assumption or admit you're right. The push-pull dynamic works incredibly well through text messages. You give her a compliment, then immediately take it back in a playful way. "You're actually pretty funny," for someone who probably thinks pineapple belongs on pizza. This creates an emotional roller coaster that keeps her engaged and responding. Now let's talk about that final 10%. Logistics and direct communication. This is where most guys spend way too much of their texting energy. Questions like, "How was your weekend?" or "What are you up to tonight?" should be used sparingly because they put you in the position of interviewing her. When you do need to handle logistics, like making plans, keep it simple and confident. Instead of asking, "Would you maybe want to grab coffee sometime if you're free?" try, "I'm checking out that new coffee place downtown Thursday around 7. You should join me." The difference is that the second approach assumes she'll want to come, rather than asking for permission. Here's something crucial that most men miss. The person who asks more questions is automatically positioned as having lower value in the interaction. Think about any conversation you've had with someone you considered impressive or important. You probably found yourself asking them questions while they shared information more freely. The same dynamic applies to texting. This doesn't mean you should never ask questions, but when you do, make them interesting ones that reveal something about her personality rather than basic interview-style queries. Instead of, "What do you do for work?" you might ask, "What's the most interesting thing that's happened to you this week?" Let me share a framework that will revolutionize how you think about text conversations. Every message you send should accomplish one of three goals. Create curiosity about you, make her feel something, or move things forward logistically. If your message doesn't accomplish at least one of these goals, don't send it. Random messages like, "Hey, what's up?" accomplish none of these objectives. They don't create curiosity because there's nothing mysterious about them. They don't make her feel anything because they're completely generic. And they don't move anything forward because they're just filler conversation. Before you send any text, ask yourself which of those three goals it accomplishes. This simple filter will dramatically improve the quality of your messages and her responses to them. Now let's discuss timing, because when you send a message can be just as important as what you say. The biggest mistake guys make is being too available. If she texts you at noon and you respond within 2 minutes, then she texts again and you respond immediately again, you're training her to see you as someone who's always waiting by his phone. This doesn't mean you should play games or follow rigid rules about waiting specific amounts of time. It means you should actually have things going on in your life that prevent you from being constantly available. If you're genuinely busy with work, hobbies, friends, or other activities, your response times will naturally vary, which creates a much more attractive dynamic. Sometimes you might respond quickly because you happen to see her message right away. Other times, you might take a few hours because you were genuinely occupied with something else. This unpredictability keeps her slightly on her toes, wondering when she'll hear from you next. There's another timing concept that's incredibly powerful, but rarely discussed: ending conversations at high points. Most guys make the mistake of trying to keep conversations going as long as possible, even when the energy starts to fade. This often leads to boring exchanges that trail off awkwardly. Instead, learn to recognize when a conversation is at its peak and end it there. If she just said something that made you both laugh, that might be the perfect time to say something like, "You're dangerous. I need to focus on work now, but we'll continue this later." This leaves her wanting more, rather than feeling drained by an endless conversation. The psychology behind this is simple. People remember how interactions end more than how they begin. If your text conversations consistently end on high notes, she'll associate talking to you with positive feelings. If they drag on until one of you stops responding, she'll remember that feeling of the conversation dying out. Here's another psychological principle that most men completely misunderstand. Women are attracted to men who seem slightly unpredictable in their communication patterns. This doesn't mean being confusing or inconsistent with your personality. It means she should never be able to predict exactly how you'll respond or when you'll message her next. If you always respond with the same energy level, use the same message length, or reply at the same times of day, you become predictable. Predictable equals boring. Instead, vary your communication style based on your genuine mood and circumstances. Sometimes be playful and energetic. Other times, be more laid back and mysterious. This keeps her guessing about what version of you she'll encounter next. Now let's move into the specific texting techniques that will make her obsessed with hearing from you. These aren't just random tricks. They're based on fundamental psychological principles that govern how women process and respond to digital communication. The first technique is what I call the curiosity gap method. Every message should leave a small gap that makes her want to respond. Most guys make the mistake of providing complete thoughts that require no follow-up. For example, if she asks about your weekend plans, don't say, "I'm going hiking with some friends," then probably grabbing dinner and watching a movie. That's a complete story with no gaps. Instead, try something like, "Got some interesting plans brewing. Should be an adventure." Now, she has to ask what kind of adventure or what makes it interesting. You've created a natural reason for her to respond. rather than just acknowledging what you said. The second technique exploits something psychologists call the Zeigarnik effect. People remember unfinished tasks and incomplete information much better than completed ones. You can use this by occasionally starting to tell her something, then getting interrupted or distracted. Oh wait, I just remembered the craziest thing that happened to me yesterday. Actually, let me call you about it later. This is too good for text. Now she's going to be thinking about that incomplete story until you finish it. This technique should be used sparingly, but when deployed correctly, it creates genuine anticipation for your next interaction. The third technique involves strategic vulnerability. Most guys either share too much too quickly or try to appear perfect all the time. Both approaches fail. Instead, occasionally share something that shows you're human without making it seem like you're seeking sympathy or validation. For example, instead of saying, "I had a terrible day at work, everything went wrong, and I'm so stressed," you might say, "Work threw me a curveball today. Nothing I couldn't handle, but definitely wasn't expecting it." The first version makes you sound like you're complaining and seeking comfort. The second shows you faced a challenge, but dealt with it confidently. Let me introduce you to the power of assumptions in texting. Instead of asking her questions, make playful assumptions about what she's doing, thinking, or feeling. This creates a more dynamic interaction because she either confirms your assumption or corrects you, both of which lead to engaging responses rather than texting, "What are you doing tonight?" Try, "I bet you're procrastinating on something important right now." If you're right, she'll be impressed by your insight. If you're wrong, she'll probably tell you what she's actually doing, which gives you more information to work with than a generic question would. The assumption technique works because it shows you're paying attention to her personality and trying to understand her, rather than just collecting basic information. It demonstrates a level of interest that goes beyond surface-level curiosity. Here's a technique that will completely change how she perceives your messages. The callback reference. Throughout your conversations, pay attention to small details she mentions, then reference them later in unexpected ways. If she mentioned she has a presentation coming up, don't just ask, "How did your presentation go?" days later. Instead, weave it into a different conversation. You're probably relieved to have that presentation behind you. Now you can focus on more important things, like figuring out what we're doing this weekend. This shows you are listening and remember details about her life, which makes her feel heard and valued. Most men fail at this because they either don't pay attention to details or they bring them up in obvious, predictable ways. The key is to reference these details naturally as part of other conversations, not as the main focus. Now let's talk about the power of the incomplete compliment. Regular compliments lose their impact quickly because they're expected and complete. An incomplete compliment creates intrigue because she has to wonder what you're really thinking. Instead of, "You look beautiful in that photo," try, "That photo is dangerous." She'll want to know what you mean by dangerous. Instead of, "You're really smart," say, "You're trouble, aren't you?" These incomplete compliments are more memorable and create emotional responses rather than simple acknowledgement. The psychology behind this is that complete compliments often feel generic, even when they're sincere. Incomplete ones feel personal and specific to her, which makes them more impactful. Here's another advanced technique: emotional contrast within single messages. Don't let your text be emotionally flat. Create small emotional ups and downs, even within individual messages. You're actually pretty cool. Too bad you probably have terrible taste in movies. This creates a mini emotional roller coaster that keeps her engaged. The contrast prevents your messages from being boring or predictable. She never knows if you're about to compliment her or tease her, which keeps her attention focused on your communication. Let me share something that will revolutionize your texting success: the principle of implied scarcity. Your messages should subtly communicate that your time and attention are valuable. This doesn't mean being rude or dismissive. It means showing that talking to her is enjoyable, but not the only thing you have going on. For example, instead of, "I have nothing to do tonight, want to chat," try, "Taking a quick break from this project. How's your evening going?" The first message suggests you're bored and available. The second implies you're busy with something important, but making time for her. This subtle difference in framing completely changes how she perceives the interaction. She goes from thinking you need her entertainment to feeling like you're choosing to spend your valuable time with her. Now let's discuss the power of narrative threads in your text conversations. Instead of treating each message as isolated communication, think of your ongoing conversation as a story that develops over time. Reference previous conversations, build on jokes from days ago, and create ongoing mysteries that unfold gradually. For instance, if you mentioned meeting an interesting character while out with friends, don't tell the complete story immediately. Share it in pieces across multiple conversations. "Remember that guy I told you about? Well, I saw him again today, and you won't believe what happened." This creates continuity and gives her reasons to stay engaged with your ongoing communication. Most guys treat each text conversation as starting from scratch, which makes their communication feel disconnected and forgettable. By creating narrative threads, you make your conversations feel like episodes in an ongoing series she doesn't want to miss. The thread technique also works because it shows you remember and value your previous interactions with her. This makes her feel important and creates a sense of shared history, even if you've only been talking for a short time. Here's a technique that exploits basic human psychology: the pattern interrupt. Once you establish a communication pattern with her, occasionally break it in surprising ways. If you usually text her in the evenings, send an unexpected morning message. If your messages are typically playful, occasionally send something more thoughtful. These pattern interrupts prevent your communication from becoming routine and predictable. They create moments where she has to pay closer attention because you're not following your usual script. The key is not to interrupt patterns randomly, but to do it when it serves a purpose. Maybe you interrupt your usual playful tone to acknowledge something important she shared with you. This shows emotional intelligence and depth. Let me introduce you to the concept of conversational investment levels. In any text exchange, someone is putting in more effort to keep the conversation going. You want to ensure that she's matching or exceeding your investment level, not the other way around. This doesn't mean counting messages or timing responses. It means paying attention to the quality and enthusiasm of her responses. compared to yours. If you're consistently sending longer, more engaging messages, while she responds with short, low-effort replies, you need to adjust your approach. The solution isn't to match her low energy, but to become more intriguing and less available. Pull back slightly until she starts investing more in the conversation. Remember, people value what they have to work for more than what comes easily. This principle extends beyond just message length. Notice if you're always the one asking questions, initiating conversations, or suggesting plans. If so, create some space for her to step up and show interest in maintaining the connection. Here's another powerful technique: the strategic misunderstanding. Occasionally interpret her messages in unexpected ways that create playful confusion. If she says, "I'm exhausted from work today," instead of offering sympathy, you might respond with, "I didn't know being a professional troublemaker was so tiring." This technique works because it shows you're not hanging on her every word or trying to solve her problems immediately. It also creates opportunities for playful back and forth as she corrects your misunderstanding. The key is to make sure your misunderstandings are obviously playful, not genuinely confusing or insensitive. You want to create humor and engagement, not actual miscommunication. Now let's talk about the power of contextual callbacks. Pay attention to things happening in her world that you can reference later without her having to explain them to you. If she mentions she's stressed about a work deadline, don't just ask about it directly later. Instead, reference it in passing. "I bet you're ready for the weekend after that crazy week you had." This shows you're paying attention to her life without making her feel like she's being interrogated about every detail. It demonstrates care and attention in a subtle, attractive way. The contextual callback technique also makes your conversations feel more connected and flowing, rather than a series of unrelated exchanges. She starts to feel like you really know and understand what's going on in her world. Here's something most men never consider. The emotional state you're in when you send a message affects how she receives it. If you're feeling desperate, needy, or anxious, that energy comes through in your words, even if you try to hide it. If you're feeling confident, playful, and abundant, that energy is equally apparent. Before sending any important message, check in with your emotional state. If you're feeling insecure or seeking validation, wait until you're in a better headspace. Your messages will be more attractive when they come from a place of confidence rather than need. This isn't about pretending to feel differently than you do. It's about timing your communication strategically, so your messages reflect your best self rather than your most anxious moments. Finally, let's discuss the principle of escalating intrigue. Each interaction should leave her slightly more curious about you than the previous one. This doesn't mean being increasingly mysterious to the point of confusion. It means gradually revealing layers of your personality while always maintaining some elements of surprise. Think of it like a good television series where each episode reveals something new about the characters while setting up questions for future episodes. Your text conversations should follow a similar arc, building her investment in getting to know you better over time. This escalating intrigue principle prevents your communication from plateauing or becoming routine. She should feel like she's constantly discovering new aspects of who you are, which keeps her engaged and interested in continuing the conversation. The key is patience. Don't try to reveal everything interesting about yourself in the first few exchanges. Save some surprises for later conversations, and always be developing new aspects of yourself that she can discover over time. Remember, the goal isn't to manipulate or deceive anyone. These techniques work because they reflect how attractive, confident men naturally communicate when they have options and aren't desperate for any particular outcome. By applying these principles, you're simply presenting the best version of yourself through digital communication. Communication, the next technique I want to share with you, will completely transform how she perceives your availability and value. It's called the strategic delay. And most men get this completely wrong. They either respond immediately to every message, making themselves seem desperate, or they follow some arbitrary rule about waiting a certain number of hours, which feels calculated and fake. Here's what you should do instead. Respond based on your actual life circumstances, but be strategic about when you engage in longer conversations. If she sends you a simple message during the day, a quick response is fine. But if she initiates a deeper conversation when you genuinely have other priorities, don't drop everything to engage immediately. For example, if she texts you at 8 in the evening with something that could lead to a long exchange and you're genuinely busy with something important, wait until you can give the conversation proper attention. Then, when you do respond, acknowledge the delay naturally. Just saw this. Had to finish something up first. But now you have my full attention. This approach shows respect for both your time and hers. It demonstrates that when you do engage, you're choosing to be present rather than just killing time. Women find this infinitely more attractive than men who seem to be constantly waiting by their phones. Now let's discuss something that will set you apart from 99% of other men texting her. Emotional intelligence in digital communication. Most guys either ignore the emotional subtext of her messages or respond to it in clumsy, obvious ways. When she shares something that happened to her, pay attention to the emotion behind the words, not just the facts. If she tells you about a difficult day at work, she's not necessarily looking for solutions or advice. She might just want to feel heard and understood. Instead of immediately trying to fix her problems or offering generic sympathy, acknowledge what she might be feeling. Rather than, "That sucks, hope tomorrow is better," try something like, "Sounds like one of those days where you question why you even set an alarm." This shows you understand the feeling without being overly dramatic about it. The key is to match her emotional energy appropriately. If she's sharing something genuinely serious, don't respond with jokes. If she's being playful about a minor annoyance, don't treat it like a tragedy. This emotional calibration makes her feel like you truly get her. Here's another advanced concept that most men never master: creating positive associations with your communication. Every time she sees your name pop up on her phone, her brain makes an instant decision about whether to feel excited, neutral, or annoyed. If your messages consistently bring value to her day, whether through humor, interesting conversation, or genuine connection, she'll start to feel a little spark of anticipation when she sees you've texted. If your messages are needy, boring, or demanding, she'll start to feel drained before she even opens them. To create positive associations, ensure that the majority of your messages give rather than take. Give her something to smile about, think about, or look forward to. Avoid messages that put pressure on her or make her feel like she needs to manage your emotions. For instance, instead of, "I'm having such a terrible day, everything is going wrong," try, "Just had the weirdest encounter at the coffee shop. This guy actually tried to pay for his drink with Monopoly money." The first message asks her to carry your emotional burden. The second gives her an amusing story that brightens her day. Let me introduce you to the concept of conversational momentum. Great text conversations have a natural flow and energy that builds over time. Poor conversations feel choppy, forced, or one-sided. Understanding how to create and maintain momentum will make your interactions significantly more engaging. Momentum comes from building on what she gives you rather than constantly changing subjects or asking unrelated questions. If she mentions she's trying a new hobby, don't immediately shift to asking about her weekend plans. Explore the hobby topic first. Ask what drew her to it, or share a related experience of your own. This doesn't mean beating topics to death or avoiding natural transitions. It means following the conversational thread she's given you before jumping to something completely different. This makes her feel heard and creates a more satisfying exchange for both of you. Another momentum killer is the interview style of conversation, where you ask question after question without sharing anything about yourself. Remember the ratio I mentioned earlier. Most of your messages should create intrigue, not gather information about her. Here's a technique that leverages basic human psychology: the curiosity loop closure. When you create intrigue or mystery in one message, make sure to eventually provide some resolution, but not always immediately. This keeps her engaged while preventing frustration. If you tell her about something interesting that happened to you, but don't finish the story, follow through within a reasonable time. The key is to close loops in unexpected ways that create new loops. When you finally explain that mysterious thing from earlier, include a detail that sparks new curiosity. For example, if you mentioned meeting someone interesting, when you finally explain who it was, you might say, "Turns out he's the brother of someone we both know." Small world, right? Actually, that reminds me of something else that happened last week that you'd find hilarious. Now you've closed one loop, but opened another. This technique keeps your conversations feeling dynamic and ongoing, rather than a series of disconnected exchanges. She starts to look forward to the next piece of the puzzle. Let's talk about something crucial that most dating advice completely ignores: the power of authentic enthusiasm. While it's important not to seem desperate or overly available, you also don't want to be so detached that you seem uninterested or cold. When something genuinely excites you, or when she shares something that you find interesting, don't hide your enthusiasm completely. Authentic excitement is attractive because it shows you're capable of passion and joy. The key is ensuring your enthusiasm is about life in general, not just about her attention. Instead of, "I'm so excited you texted me back," try, "Just tried this new restaurant, and the food was incredible. You'd actually love their dessert menu." Your excitement is about the experience, not about her validation, which makes it much more attractive. This authenticity prevents you from seeming like you're playing games or being artificially aloof. Women can usually tell the difference between genuine confidence and forced detachment. Now let's discuss the art of the callback conversation starter. Instead of opening new conversations with generic messages like, "How's your day going?" reference something from your previous interaction in an unexpected way. If she mentioned she was nervous about a presentation last week, don't start your next conversation by asking how it went. That's predictable. Instead, you might text, "I bet you're ready to conquer the world after crushing that presentation." This acknowledges what happened while setting a positive, confident tone for the new conversation. Callback starters work because they show continuity and attention to her life. They make each new conversation feel like a continuation of an ongoing connection rather than starting from scratch each time. The key is to reference previous conversations in ways that move forward rather than dwelling on past topics. Use the callback as a launching pad for new interactions, not as a way to rehash old ground. Here's something that will dramatically improve your texting success: understanding the different types of messages and when to use each one. Not every text needs to be witty or mysterious. Different situations call for different approaches. Maintenance messages keep the connection warm without requiring deep engagement. These might be simple check-ins or sharing something that reminded you of her. They shouldn't be used too frequently, but they serve an important purpose in maintaining ongoing connection. Escalation messages move the interaction forward, either emotionally or logistically. These might involve deeper conversation topics, light flirting, or making plans to meet in person. Use these when you sense she's ready for the next level of interaction. Investment messages require her to put effort into the conversation. These might be intriguing statements that make her curious enough to ask follow-up questions or playful challenges that encourage her to prove something to you. Understanding which type of message to send when will help you calibrate your communication appropriately. Don't try to escalate when she's not ready, but don't stay in maintenance mode when she's showing signs of deeper interest. Let me share a principle that governs all successful digital communication: the concept of earned intimacy. Intimacy, whether emotional or physical, should feel like something that develops naturally over time, not something that's rushed or forced. This applies to texting in subtle but important ways. Don't share deeply personal information or ask invasive questions too early in your communication. Let intimacy develop at a pace that feels natural and mutual. For example, if you've only been texting for a few days, sharing your deepest fears or asking about her past relationships is premature. But after weeks of consistent, engaging communication, deeper topics become more appropriate. The same principle applies to the tone and content of your messages. Early communications should be lighter and more playful. As your connection develops, you can gradually introduce more serious or meaningful exchanges. This gradual escalation makes her feel like she's getting to know the real you over time, rather than having everything dumped on her at once. It also ensures that each new level of intimacy feels special and earned. Here's another advanced technique: the strategic compliment sandwich. When you do give compliments, frame them in ways that don't seem like you're seeking her approval or validation. The most powerful compliments are often embedded within other types of statements. Instead of, "You're so beautiful," try, "You're dangerous with that smile." Instead of, "You're really smart," say, "I should have known you'd figure that out first." These embedded compliments feel more natural and less like you're trying to win her favor. The sandwich technique involves placing a compliment between two other types of statements, so it doesn't feel like the main focus of your message. This makes compliments feel more genuine and less calculated. Remember, the most attractive compliments often focus on her actions or choices rather than things she can't control. Complimenting her sense of humor, her perspective on something, or a decision she made carries more weight than complimenting her physical appearance. Now let's discuss something that can make or break your texting success: emotional consistency. This doesn't mean being emotionally flat or never showing different sides of your personality. It means that your core, confident, attractive energy should remain consistent even when your specific mood or communication style varies. She should never wonder if you're the same person from message to message. While you might be playful one day and more serious the next, your underlying confidence and self-assurance should remain constant. This consistency helps her feel secure in the connection while still keeping her intrigued about what version of you she'll encounter next. It's the difference between being unpredictable in interesting ways versus being confusing or unstable. Emotional consistency also means not letting her responses dictate your emotional state. If she takes longer to respond or seems less enthusiastic than usual, maintain your attractive energy rather than matching her lower investment level or becoming anxious about it. Here's a technique that leverages the power of social proof without being obvious about it: the casual reference. Instead of trying to impress her by bragging about your social life or other women's interest in you, let these things come up naturally in conversation. If other people find you attractive or interesting, this will come through in the stories you tell and the life you describe. You don't need to force it or make it the focus of your communication. For example, instead of saying, "All my friends think I'm hilarious," you might share a funny story where friends' reactions naturally demonstrate their appreciation for your humor. This is much more powerful because she draws her own conclusions rather than being told what to think. The casual reference technique works because it provides social proof without seeming like you're trying to provide social proof. It feels authentic rather than calculated. Let's talk about something crucial: the power of positive assumptions. Instead of assuming she might not be interested or that you're bothering her, assume she enjoys your communication unless she clearly indicates otherwise. This doesn't mean ignoring obvious signs of disinterest, but it means not projecting insecurity or second-guessing yourself in every message. If she's responding to your texts and engaging in conversation, assume she wants to be talking to you. Positive assumptions come through in your communication style. Messages sent from a place of confidence and positive expectation feel different than messages sent from anxiety or insecurity, even if the words are similar. This mindset shift will improve not just your texting, but your overall dating success. Women are attracted to men who assume good things will happen, not men who constantly worry about what might go wrong. Finally, let's discuss the concept of communication investment balance. In any ongoing text conversation, pay attention to who's putting in more effort to keep things going. Healthy, attractive communication should feel relatively balanced over time. If you notice you're consistently the one initiating conversations, asking questions, or trying to keep things interesting. It's time to pull back and see if she steps up. If she doesn't, you have valuable information about her level of interest. The goal isn't to keep score of every message, but to ensure that she's also invested in maintaining the connection. People value what they contribute to more than what they simply receive. This balance principle applies to emotional investment as well. If you're always the one sharing personal information or being vulnerable while she stays surface level, adjust your approach accordingly. Remember, these techniques work because they reflect how naturally confident, attractive men communicate when they have options and aren't desperate for any particular outcome. The goal isn't to manipulate anyone, but to present the most attractive version of yourself through your digital communication. By mastering these principles, you'll find that women respond to you differently through text messages. They'll be more eager to respond, more engaged in conversations, and more interested in taking things to the next level. But remember, great texting is just one part of overall attraction. The most powerful texting technique I'm about to share with you operates on a level that most men never even consider. It's called emotional anchoring. And when you master this, she'll start associating specific positive feelings with your name appearing on her screen. Here's how it works. Every emotion she experiences while reading your messages gets subconsciously linked to you as a person. If your texts consistently make her laugh, feel curious, or experience pleasant surprise, her brain starts to crave those feelings and associates getting them with hearing from you. Most guys accidentally create negative emotional anchors without realizing it. They send messages that make her feel pressured, bored, or obligated to respond. Over time, seeing their name pop up starts to feel like work rather than pleasure. To create positive anchors, focus on how your messages make her feel rather than just what information they convey. Before hitting send, ask yourself whether this message will brighten her day, make her smile, or give her something interesting to think about. If the answer is no, reconsider what you're sending. For example, instead of texting her when you're feeling lonely or need validation, reach out when you're in a genuinely good mood and have something engaging to share. Your positive emotional state will transfer through your words and become associated with your communication. The timing of positive anchoring matters significantly. If she's having a stressful day and your message provides a moment of lightness or escape, that relief becomes connected to you. Pay attention to patterns in her life and be the person who brightens difficult moments rather than adding to them. Now let me introduce you to the power of conversational seeding. This technique involves planting small references to future interactions or experiences in your current conversations. It's not about making concrete plans immediately, but about creating anticipation for things you might do together. You might casually mention an interesting restaurant you discovered, a funny movie you want to see, or an event that's coming up, without immediately asking her to join you. This plants seeds in her mind about potential shared experiences while keeping things pressure-free. Later, when you do suggest spending time together, it feels like a natural progression rather than a sudden request. She's already been thinking about these possibilities because you've seeded them in previous conversations. The key is making these references feel organic rather than calculated. They should emerge naturally from your conversations about interests, experiences, or things happening in your life. Don't force connections or make everything about future plans together. Here's another advanced technique that separates amateur texters from masters. Contextual reframing. This involves taking something she says and presenting it in a completely different light, often in a way that's more playful or positive than her original framing. If she mentions she's procrastinating on something, instead of agreeing that procrastination is bad, you might reframe it as strategic delay while her subconscious works on the problem. If she says she's being lazy on Sunday, reframe it as essential recovery time that successful people prioritize. This technique works because it shows you don't just accept conventional thinking about situations. You have your own perspective and aren't afraid to share it. It also demonstrates that you see positive aspects in things others might judge negatively. Reframing should feel natural and genuine, not like you're trying to be contrary for its own sake. The goal is to offer a fresh perspective that might actually be helpful or amusing, not to disagree with everything she says. Let me share something that will transform how she perceives your confidence level. The strategic assumption close. Instead of asking permission for things or hedging your statements with uncertainty, make confident assumptions about positive outcomes. There you have it. The 10 psychological texting techniques that will completely revolutionize how women respond to your messages. These aren't just random tricks or gimmicks. They're based on fundamental principles of human psychology that govern how attraction actually works through digital communication. Remember, the goal isn't to manipulate anyone or play games. These techniques work because they reflect how naturally confident, high-value men communicate when they have genuine options and aren't desperate for any particular outcome. You're simply learning to present the most attractive version of yourself through your phone screen. Start implementing these strategies one at a time. Master the curiosity gap method first, then add emotional anchoring to your conversations. Practice the strategic delay technique until it becomes natural. Before you know it, you'll be that guy whose messages she actually looks forward to receiving. The difference between men who get ignored and men who get obsessed over isn't luck or looks. It's understanding exactly how to trigger the right psychological responses through the words you choose and when you choose to send them. Now you have that knowledge.